At the beginning of the film, Mr. Lavey and his wife, deeply in love after many years of marriage, come together to plan their special anniversary celebration. Sartabai's group planned a world tour. Larry Sahab was excited and loved his husband's company. Larry Sahab's husband loved him deeply. They wanted to take a flight, revealing Lady Sahab's strange condition. Larry has a phobia of wearing a belt. She couldn't wear a belt in a car or a plane. Even today, she didn't wear a belt and started enjoying the journey with her husband's mess. At first, the plane flew smoothly, the journey went well with good weather. But they didn't realize that amid these, something bad could happen. During the journey, unexpectedly, the plane shook violently. Larry woke up from sleep and looked outside, and their plane was about to collide with a jet plane. Before Larry could think of anything, their plane collided with the other plane and split into two parts. Along with that plane, their plane's engine was also destroyed. The plane caught fire and was severely damaged, its pressure worsened, and the air hostess was injured. Because Larry didn't fasten his seatbelt, she was also blown away by air pressure during the flight. He grabbed her hands to stabilize, but her job was to make a lot of noise, and with great difficulty, she grabbed a seat of the braking plane. At this time, Larry Sahab was terrified. Somehow wanted to go and sit with her husband, but then, due to a loud explosion at the back side of the plane, the rear part got sucked in and fell to the ground. Despite the rear part falling down, the front part of the plane, where Larry was at that time, was flying rapidly in the air. Larry didn't care about anything. Coming up, she was trying to reach her husband. Everyone present felt that they might die instantly as reverse air pressure surged. Larry was blown aside before she flew away too much. Her husband tried to hold and save her, but the air pressure was so strong that Larry's husband could barely grab her hand, and eventually their hands separated from each other. The flying plane also fell and crashed. The part in which Larry's husband remained had fallen completely down, while the part where Larry was still in the air. And it was going downward rapidly. Anyone would have been thinking only about their death, but in Larry's mind, she thought about her husband. She had to save her life and meet her husband. With difficulty, she sat and grabbed the seat. After that, she was unconscious. A scene was shown where at that time, Larry was stuck in the jungles amidst the forests. The plane had crashed badly, and many parts of the plane were not close to her. After fully regaining consciousness, she began to remember that there had been a major. She survived the plane crash. Remembering it, she felt a sharp pain in her leg as she looked down. Leg was in bad condition. A big iron rod had stuck in her leg, and it was a very creepy scene. Her leg's condition was so bad it couldn't be seen, and Larry knew she couldn't walk in it. Nevertheless, she showed great courage. And with both hands, she pulled the rod out of her leg. Her life had gone out with her screams. The whole jungle echoed. As the rod came out, blood gushed out rapidly. To stop the bleeding, she wrapped her skirt tightly. But even such tight wrapping couldn't control her flowing blood. She had to save herself, so she had to get up and move forward. She tried to get up, but she couldn't rise in that much pain. She hoped that by this time, some rescue team would have already arrived here. So she started shouting loudly for help, but unfortunately, summoning courage, she got up herself and saw a shadow of someone behind her. She went closer and saw that there was a climber there, which raised her hope, but she still hesitated. Thinking that something might have happened to this girl, she realized that her support and courage were breaking. In a state of sorrow and pain, Larissa collapsed here. The scene has cut and will now show the Russian journal. Are there those who have received news of 2 plane crashes and have not yet started the rescue operations? People have increased efforts to rescue natively in the jungle, but so far no one has reached Larissa. We saw Larissa regain consciousness due to mosquito bites. As she awoke, she heard a helicopter's sound in her ears. And she realized that the rescue team had arrived for the operation. In the hope of survival, she decided to move forward. She took the scarf from the corpse lying beside her, tied her bandage with it, and began to move forward in the direction of the helicopter's location. Fortunately, she reached a plain area in the jungle where the helicopter crew saw her and she signaled by waving her scarf. She also tried to signal the helicopter, but unfortunately, the pilots couldn't see her. She didn't give up and started moving toward the helicopter's direction again. This path was so difficult for her that no one could imagine. Her condition was worse due to pain and weakness. On that path, she found a taddy. It looked like a treasure, and she thought why not take it now. She took a batch from the taddy and straightened its pin. After that, she strongly rubbed the pin, then rubbed it rapidly and placed it on a leaf so that the spin worked. It worked just like a compass. This trick had been given to her by her husband when they went camping, and today the same trick was saving her life. The direction indicated by this leaf had brought her to a well, from which clean drinking water was flowing. Water was very essential for survival. First, she thought to drink the water, washed her face, and then collected a lot of water into. After filling the water, she returned to her original place. Where her plane had crashed, where her street was, she took out a dead woman's coat and wore it. Because it was very cold, she then picked up a stick nearby and tied her water bag with that stick. Relying on that stick, she began to move forward carefully. Facing dangers, she was moving forward along a path that had many threats, forcing her to be very cautious. After many hours of journey, facing all dangers and getting exhausted, she reached an open plain outside the thicket, but she did not know that this place was very dangerous from the jungle, because it was a deadly area that had already drawn Larissa inside it. She began to struggle to come out. She also grabbed the ground, but the ground here was slippery before the swamp could completely suck her in. Larissa mustered all her strength to move outward and grabbed a branch, which was so strong that it could bear Larissa's weight, and she was able to come out. At this point, all her strength had been exhausted. She didn't realize she fell asleep as soon as she emerged. Hours later, she regained consciousness, saw the danger, and immediately left. She moved forward along the difficult mountainous path, hoping to save her life. Upon reaching the top, someone would surely meet her. Despite her own injuries, she kept climbing upwards, but unfortunately, as soon as she reached the peak, her footing slipped and she fell back down. For a moment, all her hopes were shattered. She wanted to not even get up from here, but then in her mind, she didn't recall all the beautiful moments with her husband during their farewell. She had never thought that her honeymoon trip would become so terrifying, and her husband would actually get separated in this trip. As soon as this thought came, she decided to search for her husband, and this decision gave her so much determination that she became. Not only did she stand up, but she also climbed the mountain to reach the top. It was both noise and peace. She considered resting a bit, but maybe it. She was never destined to survive because in front of her, a hungry tigress was already on the hunt. Larissa thought she would pass through the sight, but her bad luck. Before she could even leave, the tigress noticed her. Sensing its prey, not a shadow but the tigress started chasing Larissa, and to escape from her. Despite being exhausted and injured, Isa ran at full speed but couldn't escape as the tigress pursued her just as fast. In such a situation, as soon as the gap between Larissa and the tigress narrowed, Larissa felt her life was over, but fate played somewhat in her favor. Ahead was a pit. While fleeing, Larissa stumbled and fell into that pit, in which the tigress left her just like that. Immediately after leaving Shadney's place, she exited one path and climbed to the other side. It was a high mountain when she reached its edge. She was overjoyed because on the other side of the mountain peak, she could see that part of the plain where her husband was. In her excitement to meet her husband, she didn't think of anything and began to descend the mountain quickly. She stepped into the cold river water and moved forward. But crossing this river was not as easy as she had thought. As the river became deeper, the current carried her away with it. And the icy water froze all her blood. Somehow, she grabbed onto a stone that obstructed the river in her path and stayed out of the water, but advancing in pain was difficult for her as she trembled. Clinging to objects, she reached the shore. Where the plain was now, she was hopeful that she would see her husband, but here there was a dangerous scene. she saw a corpse that had nearly decayed since the accident happened 3 days ago. After 3 days, she found the pilot's corpse by the deck and an emergency flare gun with 2 bullets. To save her life, she summoned courage and fired 1 bullet, but unfortunately, no one was there to see it, and hear. She decided to fire the second bullet upwards towards the sky, where she hoped someone would see it during her continued journey. Something hit her feet. It was her husband's backpack, in which her husband must have made many sketches for her. A ray of hope appeared when she realized her husband was nearby. Initially, she examined the pictures, then abandoned them to begin searching for him. She met her husband far away after he was on the plane. Embracing him, tears filled Larissa's eyes. Tears filled her eyes as she awakened from peaceful 3 days of sleep. Without seeing Des, she took her wedding ring from her backpack. And she put it on her hand. Both relaxed and fell asleep, and after a while, when Larissa opened her eyes, she realized that everything she had seen. It was her dream, and the body of her husband here rested as a dead body. As she slept, she was thinking so much that throughout the forest, her crying was not audible to anyone. During this, we saw that a helicopter was also beginning to land on the same river, near which Larissa's companion's helicopter signals were also now audible. She gathered her courage and began to climb the mountain to fire a flare gun from up there. She fired the flare gun with all her might but became exhausted. For 3 days, she hadn't eaten, and her hand injury became very serious. Her luck was good that the rescue officer saw her signal and quickly came to rescue her. Her condition was very bad up to that point. These people kept her alive with just one of her flare signals. The rescue officer quickly took off his jacket and put it on Larissa and rescued her. In the final moments, we found out that this flare was the real thing. In 1981, in 2 plane crash cases, the flare was involved. Only one person managed to survive, whose story we have now seen.